Hello, Arnaud. Thank you for joining me. Arnaud Petit is the Executive Director of the International Grains Council. Arnaud, do you want to just give a bit of an introduction as to what you do and what the IGC do?
Good morning, David. IGC is doing a market transparency first. That's the main purpose of the Grain Trade Convention, the international treaty set in 1949. And if I would draw a parallel from 49, indeed, last century, indeed, the IGC is there to get information, but also to ensure that the grains market keep dynamic. And I would say this is the main challenge today, is in this time of economic recovery, how we can get the grains market, oilseeds market being dynamic in the future.
I suppose that's a really good way of looking at it, because everyone's had to be really dynamic in how they've adapted their working processes over the last couple of months. How has that sort of wider lockdown, in the UK and around the world, affected the work of the IGC? Have you seen any effect from it, or are you all still operating normally and functioning normally?
No, we are operating normally. We have been used to collect the information and also to connect our members. We have 59 country members at the moment in IGC, and we have been able to communicate, to make meetings. Even next week, we will organize a meeting about the supply chain, how this COVID-19 and beyond could affect the supply chain for the grain sector. So we continue having, thanks to new technology, having this communication among the members.
Yeah, I think the available technology that we've had recently has really saved the market from operating, hasn't it? And I guess from a sort of a market point of view specifically, we've obviously seen a lot of an increase in market intervention from governments and a lot of external market impacts coming on the grain and oilseed sector over the last 2 or 3 months across a range of commodities. But how important is it for those grain and oilseed supply chains on a global level to have that kind of clear market data and market information that the IGC provides when we've seen these sort of big sudden changes that have happened over the last couple of months?
I would say first we are 2 or 3 organizations which publish a global data about grains market. You have IGC, you have also EMIS, FAO EMIS initiative, and also USDA report, which I would say also publish on a monthly basis some information about the global market. And I would say having these 3 publications really among the months regularly helps the market operators to have a good view of what could happen on the markets. As a second point I would like to highlight is you mentioned the public intervention and government intervention on the market. Unfortunately, indeed, it was already the situation before the COVID-19. If you remember the trade disruption between US and China,
yeah,
and between other countries. So I would say it's not a new situation. We are in an era where there is this approach of government intervention on the market. What we try to do now is to look at, first of all, to get good information about the stocks level. Do we have enough stocks for the market in order to avoid the shocks on the market? And for the moment, we don't see any reason to have a tension about the stocks. The second point is about the trade flow, as I mentioned earlier. And here we have developed a storyline about COVID-19 trade measures with the governments and also with the trade. So it's thanks to a good collaboration with IGTC, the International Grain Trader Coalition. So we share information between the private sector and IGC in order to get the real information on what's happened in terms of trade. And the last point is also sometimes we see some intervention on governments as of having a potential impact on the market, but it's not necessarily the case. If you refer, for example, to what's happened in Russia with the recent decision to take a limitation about export, indeed the quota has been fulfilled by anticipation by the different importers. So that's also a part of the IGC, is to look exactly what is on the day-to-day grains flowing, shipping, in order to avoid tension or a misunderstanding of the situation. And the last point I would like to add is we have still weather issues. we talk a lot about COVID-19, but you know that in Europe we had some fear about the weather condition, too dry. In Argentina also, it's too dry and limiting the operation to export the grains. So there is some other concerns, and that's the most important, having daily information, so then you can really analyze the different movement on the market.
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually, because you mentioned there like difficulties with exporting, and you know, from a domestic point of view in the UK, AHDB have been working with the industry to create a set of guidelines for the domestic market to operate on, with respect to social distancing and best practice when operating on a day-to-day level from a contact point of view within the supply chain. But from a global point of view, I mean, how are global grain and oilseed supply chains coping with the challenges of social distancing and the instances that COVID-19 bring? You know, are we seeing any difficulties with regards to global shipping, or is everything operating as well as it did prior to the crisis?
It's not necessarily as well as it was before the crisis, but I would say no, we didn't see any specific hurdle for the bulk commodities shipping sector. Now it's moving on the normal space. Even we had a look. We have been surprised that Brazil, impacting currently by the COVID-19, has been able to increase its export of soybean. So you see, it's not a black and white situation.
Yeah.
But where we can see a real hurdle is on the containers, and we have some grains or pulses which are traded based on containers, and there is a real issue. The last point I would like to add, there have been also some innovative approach from the private sector and also from some administrations which now recognize the digitalization of signature and allows certification of export or import. So that's also something which helps the sector to cope with the COVID-19 restrictions.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you that, I mean, we've seen that within the UK as well, that sort of business pragmatism just to quickly react to the situation and find the most logical way to implement a new system has been really impressive. So moving on slightly, just as a final question, you know, we've seen in the UK and probably around the world, the availability of food and the way that consumers are perceiving food has really changed over the last few weeks. You know, we've got more information suggesting that people are cooking more from scratch at home and buying more ingredients to cook rather than buying sort of ready cooked meals. Obviously, with the closures of the restaurant and food service industry, it's driven a lot more people to be eating at home. So do you think on a global level that those sort of change in consumers' buying habits from this coronavirus pandemic is going to have an impact on the way that global supply chain operates, or will everything sort of move back to how it was before?
I would say even if it's back as before, it will not be in a short-term period of time because the crisis, globally speaking, is not yet solved. So that means we have some countries still in lockdown. We have a lot of discussion about a potential second wave. So I feel that it's a situation as we are operating now is not for just few weeks or few months. Now the big question for the consumers, I would say maybe there is two ways to think. Is first of all, as you mentioned, the food service industry and restaurant, how the consumer will be confident to come back on the restaurant, which have an impact for the livestock sector, and by implication for the feed wheat sector, for example, how this can come back quickly as normal. And the second point is maybe for the supply chain approach, maybe the consumers would like to get also some local production in the future. Because that's the crisis, the coronavirus crisis has shown also that how we are interdependent of the different economies between producers and importers. And maybe some industry would be willing to answer to the fear of the consumers to develop some local chain. That's a kind of trust, I would say, for the companies. And that could have also an impact on the grain sector, how to redevelop some grains production locally based. That's something we have to look for the future. For IGC, indeed, we do usually every 2-3 years, a 5 years forecast for the supply and demand balance sheet for the grain sector. And for the coming 6 months, we will really pay special attention at that point. Could we see some new developments which can change the structure of the market in the future? But it's too early to have a clear view of what would happen from the consumer perspective, but also for the global value chain.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, definitely. So, well, thank you for your time, Arnaud. It's been brilliant. Do you want to just quickly mention your conference that you have next month? Because I think that probably would be covering a lot of the topics that we've just talked about here in the last few minutes in a lot more detail.
Yep. About the conference, indeed, we decided, in the view of increasing market transparency, IGC to hold the conference, International Grains Conference, in a digital format in order to allow all the supply chain operators to accede to that conference. And we have, I would say, 3 main topics we would like to address during that conference. First of all, the globalization. COVID-19 impacted all the global value chain in the grain sector. So we have to look again now how the globalization will develop after this crisis, so beyond COVID-19. The second point is about climate change. Climate change is also a global issue, and the grain sector has made some initiative to integrate that specific matter. So we have also a specific session where we would like to see different operators, from producers to processors, to explain what they are doing in terms of climate change and carbon footprint issue. And the third point, which is very also accurate for the future, the trade financing, because having an economic recession, in one point of time there will be an issue about how to finance trade in the grain sector.
Yes.
Remind that in average 40% of the chip or the grains shipped has a journey of more than 1 month. So you see there is a need for financing the trade of these grains. And that's something also we will need to see in the future, how we can do it. And that this is why we have a different stock exchange representative making an intervention, and we could have some flavor of what could be the trade finance in the future. And for producers, what I would like to highlight is we have then a series of commodities workshop for the main grains commodities, and we have requested to grains operators and to experts in the trade in this specific commodity to address the main challenges and how they see the situation for wheat, maize, soybean, even rapeseed after the COVID-19 crisis. So that's really more than 60 speakers across the world. Really, that's really important, and you have an opportunity to address questions to that speakers with a Q&A session with a different time. So I hope you will enjoy that conference, and we will be very happy to get also feedback from you in order to always update the program and to fine-tune and to be accurate to the main challenges of the grain sector.
Yeah, that's great. I think at this time, when you see this level of uncertainty in the world, I think it's a great advantage, and it's a great point that the global cereal supply chain has, that it's able to come together in this way, and it's able to communicate clearly in this way. Arnaud, thank you for your time. It's been great to talk to you. I hope you are able to get back to work in a normal way as quickly as possible, and we'll be able to see each other in person soon.
Okay, great. No, that's and you too. Also, I hope that also you. I understood that you enjoy to work at home. If you work close to your wife, it's always more definitively. But I hope sure that we will have time to see face to face, because technology is good, but sometimes it's good also to have meeting face to face.
Definitely.